Hello and welcome. After a week off, the goal that absolutely needed to be ticked off was simple: beat the Bombers. It didn't matter the level of conviction, as simply meeting this requirement would keep Carlton's season alive, which given our position now, is well and truly the case. You can twist the narrative in multiple different ways. Carlton repeated a pattern that has more consistency than really any player in the side this year. Carlton played a VFL side and didn't comprehensively beat them. But I'm looking from a viewpoint of, well, while these things may very well be true, that's not to say there were some massive fourth quarter moments which swung this game in Carlton's favour. And that's what I'll be placing under the microscope this week. Let's waste no further time. As per usual, Carlton's performances are largely dictated off the back of the midfield battle. In this game, playing a weakened Essendon backline meant this was key. While clearances were dead even at quarter time, and Carlton only had a +2 advantage for inside 50s, their efficiency would have taken the roof off of the MCG if it existed. Carlton were well in control, intercepting and taking command of the air. And that went even when the Bombers did take it forward. However, by three-quarter time, Essendon led the clearance category by 9, at one stage leading 35-21. And while the inside 50s were largely even throughout, and Carlton led contested possessions, and through to the fourth led hitouts to advantage and first possessions, Essendon were seeing more damage. At this point, the midfield needed to step up. Walsh, De Koning, Akers, Lord and Cripps had combined for a measly 14 disposals in the third. Adam Chera in the post-game said that when Voss was going at his playing group at three-quarter time, this was the messaging.
Yeah, we probably just a bit passive at the start of that third quarter with that bodywork around the contest, and on our end it was just about ramping that back up. In the
fourth, this bunch had 35, and by game's end had flipped the clearance count around to end in their favour, marking an 18-3 advantage since they found themselves down 14 in this category. What was occurring in the third that perhaps got rectified in the fourth? And then what were some other peripheral key moments that helped the Blues tremendously in experiencing triumph on the evening? Let's kick it off with some stoppage occurrences in the third. And we heard Adam Chera mention the word physicality, which was lacking in this period. So much so, Carlton had only 2 tackles to show for 11.5 minutes out the gate in the second half. This most definitely showed face when you look at the Essendon player breaking clear from the stoppage and what was done by the Carlton player beforehand. This is one that tremendously stands out. De Koning actually wins the tap, but it's a bit of a light brush off by Dersma, which creates separation. And then positionally, the Bombers are set to attack the corridor, not only through Durham, but by Nick Martin, who displays a strong read of the situation, and the Bombers are able to generate a score from that sequence. Take a look at another example here, where the Bombers have brought a spare up to the stoppage, which is now leaving one of Caldwell or Setterfield open, as opposed to Perkins, who would be the loose. This isn't just a spare off the back of stoppage like Doherty is stationed. The Bombers have one right up at the ball, meaning even though the tap is won, yet again it's steered clear due to that lack of physicality. This happened on a second occasion in the quarter, where Essendon's loose was right on the ball, while the Carlton spare sat externally, potentially to be in contact with where the ball would land on the defensive side. Literally 8 seconds of game time later, the lack of physicality shows face again. Walsh is asking a lot of O'Keefe to hit it over the top to this space, and it's a simple ushering to allow Durham an easy hand pass to Caldwell, who also was easily allowed to freely move with little resistance. And then about 30 seconds after that, on a forward 50 stoppage, Walsh is back here. But I feel with those throw-ins dropping short, I sense you have no chance of getting it out back at least off the initial hit. Durham is open and he tracks the ball unattended right the way through. Now, all of these occurred prior to the eventual outcome of Essendon being +14 in clearance and the lead dwindling down to 10 points. Why was this lack of physicality so significant? Well, there's a reason the lead was sliced. While Carlton's scoring profile was largely led from the defensive midfield zone of the ground, Essendon were getting deeper entries from these stoppages. Essendon's forward pressure was prolific, especially in the third term for both tackles and intercepts. With Essendon's coverage of the ground just generally improving due to all these factors at play, Carlton were conceding and were lacking the precision to pick their way through an undersized, yet honourable, Essendon defensive effort to score themselves. Within this, they perhaps didn't have the runners to keep play moving directly, rather opting for more lateral play, which was a way of beating around the bush rather than facing it head on. Failing to breach Essendon's structure had its fair share of consequences. This is probably the best example, with Matt Carroll winning a free kick deep in Carlton's defensive 50. With Doherty dropping a simple mark, it goes from a potential overlap situation out wide to a bit of a clunkier exit. Zach Merritt's closing speed is elite as Carlton's exit is significantly delayed, and yet even despite this, Carlton earned back possession in a critical part of the ground, an area that benefited the Blues on the night. Cripps is wide open when Clark boots it centrally, and Walsh's rapid-fire hand pass means Akers can let Sard fly forward, and the space opens up for a handball at this moment. Despite an excellent effort to ensure one of those deep Bombers entries didn't occur, he decides to pivot like a lorry and makes no illusions about where he wants to handball it to. Not only would quicker decision-making have freed up Cripps, but also Sard in a very optimal position for his disposal. It's left to Jack Silvani to save our ass for the millionth time, and God knows what Matt Carroll was aiming for even before he let this kick fly. But it's an excellent re-entry by Zach Johnson. De Koning's flying in for a mark over a spoil, which is pretty sinful given he ends up behind Wright, who has a fair bit of momentum running up at the ball, and De Koning's positioning has barged Wiedering out of the way, who probably would have spoiled. As visualised, Essendon's pressure was tremendous. Carlton's precision and nuance heading forward was not, and it's begun off the starting position of this play, caused by clearance. Here's another example. From what we showed before, O'Keefe is in the ruck, and I'd have to assume at least one of McGovern or Curnow are on field. But you can see in the case of a switch, the first to contact the far side will be Akers, Motlop, Williams. When Haynes takes it and immediately looks left, he's got time given the Silvani shepherd, but Essendon are far more set than the Blues, who need to overload this side, though lack the personnel to perhaps shift this defence by running at them. No one's run boundary side, and an option in this general area doesn't exist except, say, Walsh, which also isn't smart given who's behind him. So given you can't short pass your way out, you need precision. Akers is your best chance. It needs to sit probably in this sort of range, but of course, that's dangerous if it falls with the options that could be open for the Bombers. And that's the issue with a lack of height amazingly on Carlton's end in this situation, and the boundary line being not reachable. Haynes goes for the safer kick, but put that in quotations because that shit's not advantageous whatsoever. And it ends up being a re-entry anyway, which basically repeats exactly what I've just said, in the order of winning it on the last line after a lack of physicality, followed by a dump kick to a 2-on-2, which is highly questionable. The fourth quarter, however, shaped up quite differently, as we've mentioned, with Carlton steadying. While Essendon did outscore the Blues in the fourth quarter, the Bombers only registered 4 scores, and the majority of those weren't caused by a faltering system, but rather individual errors. More importantly, Carlton's vast improvement in winning clearance meant they well exceeded the total of 4 inside 50 disposals that came during the third quarter's entirety, crucially keeping Essendon at bay with the territory battle evening. Carlton were getting numbers behind the ball, allowing for a defensive recovery on Essendon counterattacks and a bit more fluidity taking it ahead, especially on the open side of the ground. This led to some early fourth quarter scoring opportunities. You'll note that a lot of Essendon possessions around the ball were far more contested and hard fought than the third. For Carlton's freakish first goal of the fourth, watch the Akers-Hobbs matchup. Now, first of all, Goldstein's handball to Merritt isn't great, but the physicality is crucial, and Cincotta's performance embodied this, as Merritt's on-ball impact was phased out as the game wore on. Carlton win this clearance, and Will White's fresh legs, mixed in with some anticipation, helps force an effective rollover with Akers assisting. The Bombers clear but to an out number, which Hollands is smart in utilising as he finds space out wide. This is where Ben Hobbs has ended up, but does little to impact, as Hollands ducks inside utilising the space further. And Blake Akers, by his standards, kicks a miracle goal. That's begun from a clearance. Carlton's structure builds to play forward half footy, and usually the finishing touch doesn't exist, but Akers' kick skips that step and Carlton are the beneficiaries. Now, for some big moments in the final 15 minutes or so of the game. The first is, well, Carlton's final goal. There's some very important junctures in that sequence. Orazio may have not had many touches, but this 1%er is so important, because if Roberts' disposal is anything clean, there's more numbers for Essendon at the fall of the ball. White rolling up 2 is vital, not only for allowing Fantasia to pressure the ball carrier, as White covers Martin, but then White is also there for that relieving kick, which opens up the De Koning pressure act. And beyond that, Parrish missing a simple hand pass is catastrophic when you see how many Carlton players are on the ball, with Fogarty a handy contributor in the moment. Ollie Hollands was a massively hard worker in the last quarter, both off the back of stoppage and around the ground, but not rewarding him here was probably the correct call, as Williams is quicker to react. And so there is the goal that gets Carlton 4 goals up, which in retrospect sealed the deal. But moments later, De Koning has had a spell, and Hudson O'Keefe plays a very important chop-out role for maybe a 4-minute block. Carlton win a number of clearances in a row off the back of his tap work and ground level work. He takes a defensive contested mark, forget the kick afterwards. This work was pretty critical in placing Carlton on top to force turnover, generate opportunities, and just generally kill critical time Essendon were hoping to spend at their attacking end, even though Essendon did score in this time. I think Alex Cincotta had some really big moments around the ball too in the fourth. Something as subtle as this, where he goes from being very engaged as to where the ball is at, with Merritt down behind the play, to being incredibly ready for where the ball is headed, all whilst having Merritt in the periphery. It was fumbled on the hand pass, but Cincotta's interception ensures Merritt's impact remains low key, and he knocks the ball to Carlton's advantage, which favours them, given their loose man in a small pocket of space. A free kick is conceded by the Blues, but as opposed to a forward 50 entry, the Bombers now need to divert, given the ball would land a lot shallower than you'd hope from a Bomber perspective. That said, whilst Carlton get what they want here, and they get what they want after the Bombers switch, it's a subtle block by Merritt on TDK which can't be prevented by a tag that turns disadvantage into advantage, with Wright not utilised, partially given his position, and Goldstein is also in no man's land. Massive moments all round. This is also incredibly subtle by De Koning on this Curnow set shot. While Goldstein may partially influence this positioning by De Koning works brilliantly. I mean, this potentially could be an understanding of the percentages with where Curnow usually misses. Don't quote me. I don't have sources within the club. He uses the body work incredibly well, and so no matter if he marks or not, a simple palm down over the line will make this a 2-goal game, going from 6 to 7 points in margin. Him protecting that space means Goldstein and Dersma flying in will only realistically be able to hit the ball this way as well, and that's where it lands. Unfortunately for the Bombers, Martin being goalkeeper, that's not enough to keep it out. Then from that next kick in, Will White just needed to brace to lock this ball up, but that doesn't occur. But luckily for the Blues, an umpire call and a dropped mark later, Adam Sard is serviced by Sam Walsh, who supports and then does well to provide the team with some composure. A critical sequence that cancels out what could have been a costly mistake by Will White. Sam Walsh, within the last 3 minutes, also has a couple of vital moments beyond being a part of this passage. He works to present as an option, then with the help of Sard, critically intervenes to chew up some more clock, piled on with a 50-metre penalty in Carlton's favour. He's almost single-handedly chewed up 90 seconds purely by his involvement as he finds Akers, by which point Carlton have held the Bombers off for long enough, with a couple aerial contests, pressure acts and hardball gets fittingly sealing the deal. The story for much of the game. So look, in retrospect, it wasn't the prettiest of wins, but a win is a win. Just as easily could Carlton have been resigned to the same fortune they have been subjected to on a number of occasions. And in that case, we'd be saying season over. But it's not, and we move. What do you extract from the game? Do the negatives outweigh the positives? Do Essendon deserve more credit? And what has the most room for improvement in Carlton's game? I look forward to reading your responses. We'll chat to you in next week's analysis, but until then, stay safe, enjoy the rest of your day, and bye for now.